Hey folks, so we are taking a look at the Japanese architecture today. So, some things to note about it. We got it up here. One story, staying low to the ground, with undressed wood, which is kind of like being respectful of nature, which goes with our Shintoist ideas. The floors are sometimes raised above the ground, less humidity coming from the earth into the house. It has a place to escape because it is a tropical kind of environment. The eaves are long. Eaves are those parts that stick out, from the edge of the roof line. So it creates more shady areas to naturally cool the environment. And we would also have a incorporation of things like paths, natural material, respect for nature, gardens, paths, and that sort of thing. On the interior, we've looked at some screens, but we also have sliding doors and sliding walls so that the interior space can be flexible, and natural mats covering wood floors as opposed to like wall to wall carpet. Now, it's not always that way, but here's kind of an interiors where you can take a look, see how these doors would slide to divide this space from the outside, and this one could become two spaces if these doors would move in both directions. But, here's our garden paths, our outdoor. And we see a Zen rock garden here, which we'll talk a little bit more about in another slide. So, what we're going to look at today is a place called Todai-ji, built in 743 and then rebuilt around 1700, I think, in response to a significant damage from a typhoon. It has sculptures by Unkai and Kaikei wood. It's ceramic tile roof tiles, and this is in Nara, Japan, which would have been the capital of Japan at the time. So at that time, the emperor embraced Buddhism, and in doing so gave the people of Japan something to think about other than economic hardships, which apparently they were suffering in 743. The main temple here, or building, was for political uses, but also served as the largest monastery, right, that would become a prototype for other Buddhist temples to be built in Japan's 66 provinces. It is the world's largest wooden structure at the time that it was being built. And we see these familiar proportions that have been adopted and brought through looking at pagodas in China as well, where we have two stories, which is unusual, meant to show that this is a big deal, this building, with one story being a little bit smaller than the story before it. Complex also had 9 story pagodas, 2 of them to house the monks' lecture halls, and of course, gardens. It became the prototype for other Buddhist temples in Japan, and the people who studied here went to build those temples in other places and spread the faith. In addition to those gardens and other temples or dormitories essentially to house people, we had a casting done between 7,000 and 1,000. So took a while, or maybe had been recast several times, because what I read is that the bottom is not the same original piece. But we have this giant Buddha, the largest metal Buddha in the world. And I'm not sure if that's at the time of or this right now, but we wanted to invest a serious amount of effort into doing something significant to celebrate that Japan was going to be embracing Buddhism. From the side here, you can see his mudra. It says, "Do not fear and welcome." So this is a welcoming Buddha. He sits on lotus petals, which of course we remember as another symbol of him, and that this is the last original part of the piece. Can't quite make it out there, but you get a sense of the scale. And in addition to that, we have these wooden carved Neo-Guardian figures, believed to be carved by the sculptor Unkai, who we'll talk about in a little bit, stacking pieces of wood and then kind of gluing them together and carving, and that these would have been inspired by some of those masculine figures, the Vajrapani that we saw at Longman Cave in China. But look at how fierce they are and how muscular they are, and then the masterful craftsmanship to be able to get all these curves and the natural gestures taking place in it. The back has a south gate, which is today the main gate. We can see 3 open bays and 2 that are shut, so for a little extra credit, tell me why. I've been looking myself. The other thing to note about this back gate is that the proportions of the first eaves and the second eaves are the same, which is, again, unusual. That means that they had to have these huge beams to support the extra weight that was provided by the extra tiles and all the structure that was building up that second story to this back gate. And if we remember from China, the back gate was probably where the emperor would enter, right, in the Forbidden City. So this is an important gate, even at the time. It was rebuilt again after the typhoon. It has its own name, Nandaimon. Not important for us to remember that, but again, it's supposed to be an impressive, massive structure. The last thing for this video would be the Kai School of Sculpture, which we had a civil war around this time period in Japan. And because of the destruction and perhaps earthquakes at the same time, there was a lot of rebuilding that needed to take place. And in the need to rebuild, we had to need to redecorate as well. So there was a huge demand for sculptures. And here in Nara, we would have had 2 teachers, Unkai, the leading figure of the school, and Kaikai, another great master of the art of sculpture. So we'll stop there for this video, and we will then pick up with this one in just a minute.